RTV6, Indianapolis This Week.
Thank you so much for joining us here on Indianapolis This Week. I'm Jason Fechner, and we begin this Sunday with the Affordable Care Act still very much in place after Republicans and the president failed to get enough support behind the American Health Care Act. An absolute whirlwind late this week in Washington, where the president and Vice President Pence tried to get holdouts on board, but when push came to shove, no deal. Not enough votes to get it across the finish line. The failure came in the wake of President Trump's warning of political consequences to those Republicans who didn't fall in line behind the plan. Friday, he tweeted, after 7 horrible years of Obamacare, skyrocketing premiums and deductibles, bad health care, this is finally our chance for a great plan. The big question still, where does the AHCA go from here?
There is a block of no votes that we had that is why this didn't pass. They were a sufficient number of votes that prevented it from passing, and they didn't change their votes. We were close. Some of the members of that caucus were voting with us, but not enough were, and therefore, and I met with their chairman earlier today, and he made it clear to me that the votes weren't going to be there from their team, and that was sufficient to provide the votes, the balance to not have this bill pass.
To thank Paul Ryan. He worked very, very hard. I will tell you that. He worked very, very hard. Tom Price and Mike Pence, who's right here, our vice president, our great vice president. Everybody worked hard. I worked as a team player and would have loved to have seen it pass. But again, I think you know I was very clear, because I think there wasn't a speech I made, or very few, where I didn't mention that perhaps the best thing that could happen is exactly what happened today.
Amidst that whirlwind in Washington, Indiana Governor Eric Holcomb late this week rallied more governors across the country to get behind the bill and push for its passage, saying HIP 2.0 wouldn't suffer, calling the state plan a model for the rest of the nation. $1 billion in federal funding for the program was on the line in the health care bill. Holcomb's reasoning for backing it, he says states can deliver on Medicaid if given the proper authority, control, and time. He joined 7 other governors in sending a letter to Republican leaders in the House, urging them to approve the AHCA.
We have to determine, we have to be the change agent, and it's going to take leadership at the state level to make sure, as we've seen recently, that measures, incentives, and flexibility and control are included in the bill.
The current health care bill gives states a smaller match for Medicaid expansion programs like HIP 2.0 starting in fiscal year 2020. Indiana would pick up a larger portion of that cost. And the man that Governor Holcomb replaced, Vice President Mike Pence, of course, canceled various travel plans Friday as he worked to try to get the votes for the bill. Pence himself was essentially called out earlier this week by Minority Leader Chuck Schumer.
7 years since the ACA passed, the uninsured rate in the state of Indiana has fallen by 35%, with 339,000 Hoosiers gaining coverage. What are you going to say to them, Vice President Pence? 224,000 Hoosiers have health care insurance today because Indiana expanded Medicaid coverage under the Affordable Care Act. What are you going to say to them, Mr. Vice President?
So there you go, and we are joined by our political insiders right now here this week. Mary Beth Schneider, Pete Seat with the Indiana GOP, and for the Democrats, Adam Kirsch. A whole lot of hullabaloo in the few weeks leading up to Friday. In the end, there weren't the votes to get it across that finish line. Mary Beth, are you surprised?
Actually, yeah, a bit, because normally majorities can get their members together, and the argument here was simply just keep the bill alive, and I have seen that work over and over and over again. But when you're seeing only 17% approval in polls, Congressman's office being flooded with calls against this, the Koch brothers against it, the Health Association, the Medical Association, Heritage Foundation, I believe, all coming out against it, the momentum became to vote no.
Adam, surprised?
Slightly. The Republicans have campaigned since literally day one that the Affordable Care Act came in place, that they wanted to take away the Affordable Care Act, eliminate coverage for pre-existing conditions, and kick people off Medicaid. They had that opportunity this week, and they failed. It's unquestionably a good news for the country. Here in Indiana, we'll have 400,000 people who will get to stay on HIP 2.0 because the funding won't be eliminated. Policy-wise, it's a good deal for Hoosiers. Politically, who knows? I think it hurts Donald Trump because he loses his art of the deal master negotiator shield that he's campaigned on.
Pete, there was a bit of a giggle there as Adam was speaking.
Yeah, I don't know how he says half the things he says with a straight face sometimes, but we wouldn't be at this point where we're looking to repeal and replace Obamacare if the bill were good to begin with. And Joe Donnelly, your United States Senator, Democrat, helped put that in place, and had he not done that, we wouldn't have been in this position. You know, you've got this small group, the House Freedom Caucus, who not that long ago couldn't even get their calls returned by the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, and now they're getting one-on-one meetings with the President of the United States. They're going to try and exact some influence out of that.
So power's gone to their head?
Well,
I bet.
I don't know that I would say that, but they've got some clout. And they wanted to see certain things come out of this bill, and they didn't get what they wanted. They couldn't get to yes.
I spoke with Senator Donnelly this week. He continues to push for a bipartisan fix for Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act. Pete, in the midst of that, what do Republicans do?
Well, again, you wouldn't need a bipartisan fix if he hadn't voted for this to begin with. You know, Joe Donnelly goes to D.C., he votes for the Affordable Care Act, for Obamacare, and then he comes to Indiana and says, oh, well, we need to fix it. It's not perfect. We'll get things done. But he's there lockstep every time with them in Washington, D.C. So you've got one thing going on over there, the way he votes, and you've got another thing going on here, the way he talks. And he's just got to get his story straight.
I got to disagree a little bit here. The one reason they're having trouble passing it is that there are so many things about Obamacare that people actually like. Continuing coverage, young people on their parents' health insurance, no lifetime cap, expanded Medicaid, all those things people don't want to give up, but they don't want to pay the cost of getting those things. So you've got a real tug-of-war then between the real conservatives who don't think this is a real repeal and the moderates who are afraid that it's taking away too much. They were even at the last minute pulling out essential health benefits, which are things like trips to the emergency room, mental health, drug addiction, which right now is a huge issue across Indiana and other states. And so I think, you know, clearly wasn't a perfect bill, but I think if we were talking about let's fix what people think is wrong, as opposed to repeal, replace with a mishmash, I think they'd be having better luck.
Adam, where does this issue go from here?
It'll be interesting to see. President Trump said he wants to just move on and leave the Affordable Care Act in place. That'll be a fairly big, another broken promise from the president. He said, we're going to win on health care so much, we're going to win, we're going to be sick of winning. He's got a very different definition of winning than I do.
Mary Beth, Governor Holcomb getting behind this bill late this week, pushing other governors to get behind it as well. Was that the right political strategy?
Actually, I don't think so. Holcomb's having a very good run. This is a very tough decision for Holcomb when you have Mike Pence there pushing hard for it. But the HIP 2.0 depends on that money continuing. That's been very popular. That's actually one of the ways other states might want to go. And unless they come back with some way to fund that, that's gone. I think that's tough.
I don't know that it was a huge loss as everyone is putting it up to be. I think it was really refreshing to see the president, the vice president, the speaker, all these people working together to get something done. They just didn't get enough people there.
Master at the clock, Adam, Pete, Mary Beth, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We appreciate you being here. Also this week, of course, the Senate Judiciary Committee could vote on President Trump's nominee to the Supreme Court, but the battle over Neil Gorsuch is intensifying. Gorsuch sailed through 4 days of confirmation hearings last week, emerging mostly unscathed, but Senator Schumer announced plans to oppose his confirmation and indicated Democrats would try to filibuster to force Republicans to secure 60 votes to move the nomination forward. I spoke to Senator Donnelly this week, who isn't committing yet either way.
I think it's been really, really informative. I've read his court decisions, some of his writings, have watched the testimony, and am putting that all together, and am keeping an open mind, as I said before.
Much more to come. Stay tuned on that. The White House says it's truly disappointing that Senator Schumer has announced that he intends to oppose Judge Gorsuch's nomination to the court, setting up that filibuster showdown. It's a message many hope is not only felt across Indianapolis, but the entire country. Signs popping up across the north side in 3 languages, but with one goal. Our Sunday Spotlight with the pastor playing a big role next on Indianapolis This Week here on RTV6.
For a great 0 down payment lease.
Welcome back to our Sunday Spotlight now, and a conversation on religion, tolerance, and compassion here in Indianapolis. Dozens of new yard signs popping up across the north side, 3 languages, all with the same message. Some signs of the times are sprouting across Indy's north side, along Illinois, up and down Capitol. In Spanish, Arabic, and English they read, "No matter where you're from, we're glad you are our neighbor."
I first became aware of the signs online. It was a Mennonite church in Virginia.
Sean Coons and his wife are pastors at Fairview Presbyterian at 46th and Capitol. The signs, a way to spread the church's message outside of Sunday's sermon.
It's an important message to get out, to be welcoming. It's a very Christian message that no matter where you're from, we're glad you're our neighbor. And it's a very timely message, and a lot of our members want to be able to kind of make a public witness of being welcoming and then being supportive of all sorts of people.
It's a message that recently thrust former Indianapolis Archbishop Cardinal Joseph Tobin into the national spotlight, standing up for a man facing deportation in New Jersey.
To persecute a fellow like that in the name of some law or politic, I think is basically immoral.
Back here in Indy, different denomination, same message.
Several roles the churches can play. I mean, there's the actual kind of politics and the effects of what any legislation is doing right now. And that can be decided, by politicians, but then there's also the climate and the rhetoric of what's being talked about and how we're talking about other people, how we're talking about immigrants and refugees and neighbors and people who disagree with you. And I think the church has a lot to say about acting out of compassion, acting out of love, not acting out of fear. I think there's a lot of kind of, I don't want to say made up fears, but there's a lot of fears that are being overplayed, and they're just not really based in hard fact. And so, especially in the Christian faith, we're called to act not out of fear of something that maybe possibly could happen, but we're called to act out of love. And so we say, we're going to be welcoming, and maybe it puts us a little more at risk, maybe it doesn't. Either way, that's no reason to stop loving.
These signs come in the wake of recent threats made against the Jewish Community Center in Indy. This week, an arrest in that case. The signs also a way to unite different religions here together to stand up for one another.
Now, whenever anyone is threatened, I think the church has an obligation to respond, whether they're threatened because of their faith or their race or their orientation or anything. The church is called to step up and say, that's not right. When people are threatened seemingly because of their culture or especially religion, the church doubly has a responsibility to step up. In our country, if you attack any religion or any freedom of religion or try and get people to kind of quash their faith down, even if it's a completely different faith from ours or a sister faith like Judaism, it still has an effect on us, and that can have a real chilling effect. So it's just our obligation, as church, as Christians, but then just as neighbors, to stand up for each other and say, no, we've got your back. And these people who are trying to intimidate you, these people who are trying to make you fearful, you don't have to worry about them because you've got a lot more people on your side.
And that's what people living throughout these neighborhoods are displaying. Agree or disagree, their opinion and belief on display for the city to see.
Just put in another order for signs this morning. We got about 75 originally, and I think we're down to less than 20. So a number of our folks have taken them. Folks from our daycare have taken them. We've put it on Facebook, so people have just stopped in. They've heard from a neighbor. We've got nothing but positives about the signs, and it's great that we're able to do something like that and just help other people state their welcome very publicly.
And if you would like to put one of those signs in your yard, simply stop by Fairview Presbyterian during normal business hours. Time now for I Say You Say, our weekly commentary, where a different guest each week lets you know what's on his or her mind. Our guest today, Matt Will, financial economist at the University of Indianapolis.
I have a favor to ask my fellow Hoosiers. Next time you see your elected official, ask him or her to remove the D for Democrat or R for Republican from behind their name, replace it with an H for Hoosier, and do what's good for Indiana. We have some serious problems that need fixing, and we must put politics aside. On some topics, the president has it right, and on others, not so much. We have the third highest corporate tax rate in the world, and this is forcing companies to move overseas. Because of overregulation, our local banks hire as many as 4 times more people just to comply with government rules more than they hire to help you and me, the customer. And while we all hoped the Affordable Care Act would fix our health care system, it is quickly becoming another entitlement that could bankrupt our nation. While the president deserves our support on these topics, when it comes to international trade, it's a different story. Indiana runs a trade surplus with the rest of the world, and our state's economy ranks 6th in the nation for its dependency on free trade. Goods from all over the world flow through Indiana on their way to other places. We need free trade. So in this time of partisan bickering and hate from both sides, when someone asks you, what side are you on? Or when someone asks, are you a Republican or a Democrat? Simply reply with a smile and say, I'm a Hoosier. I'm Matt Will, and that's what I say.
Our thanks to Dr. Will. Now we want to know what you've got to say. Let us know what you think of what he spoke about or anything on your mind about Indianapolis this week. You can reach us on Twitter, on the RTV6 Facebook page, on the RTV6 app, or at theindychannel.com. A once flourishing local supermarket chain now struggling to stay alive. Several Marsh stores are closing. We're looking into how long it can last.
Stoops, simply awesome.
Welcome back. Eli Lilly is expanding in Indy and all across the U.S. This week, the drug maker announced that it would spend $85 million to expand its Indy facility that builds its diabetes drug Trulicity. It's part of a 5-year plan in which the company will spend $850 million to produce more of its drugs to fight diabetes all across the country. Meanwhile, one after the other over the past week now, Indianapolis-based Marsh supermarkets announced store closures across central Indiana. 4 this past week alone, 2 earlier this year. From a regional chain of 120 grocery stores a few years ago, now to just over 60. Marsh blames it on poor performance. The million-dollar question, how long can it go on? Earlier this week, Marsh said it's lights out at its Madison Avenue store on Indy's south side and another in Peru. Before that, 2 additional closures, this north side Marsh in Nora and another in Richmond. When asked about closures and unpaid bills and rent, Marsh says they continue to remodel stores and look for ways to grow. Meet 3 skeptics. Joe Lackey of the Indiana Grocery and Convenience Store Association.
They're definitely under the gun. I mean, they've made that clear.
Kyle Anderson of the IU Kelly School of Business at IUPUI.
Does it sound like they're a dying company?
Yeah, I'd say that they probably are, that at some point somebody's going to buy them out.
And local shopper Teresa Weaver. In her neighborhood, she can choose from Kroger, Meijer, Target, Fresh Market, Fresh Time, Safeway, Aldi, Walmart, and Marsh.
I don't know what the problem was there, but it just didn't seem like they were keeping pace.
Marsh, a local family-owned company, started in 1931, sold to a Florida investment holding company in 2006. Experts say since then, shoppers have changed. So too has the competition.
It's a very, very, very competitive market in Indiana, and especially Indianapolis, greater Indianapolis area, always has been. One of the major test markets for food products throughout the United States has always been Indianapolis. So it's tough to make it here.
I think they had a great little niche. They were kind of a premium store. I always thought of them as having a very kind of nice brand, and people were very loyal to Marsh. Over time, I think some of their stores have just gotten a little bit tired, and they've kind of not had a consistent strategy.
Marsh may still have some high-profile stores on their shelves, like 2 bustling grocery stores in growing downtown Indy. But given thin profit margins, competition from big box, high-volume stores, and now home delivery and online competition, any weak link can be perilous.
There is no Don Marsh anymore, so there's no real identity anymore. They're still using the Marsh name, but he's not there.
I think they're higher priced than most, and it didn't seem like their products were getting turned over as well. I remember the Don Marsh days, seemed like it was better then.
Speculation has been rampant that Marsh's prime properties might be sold to a chain like Giant Eagle, which opened the sprawling Market District last year, but so far no sale, just closures. Marsh also owns Village Pantries. There are more than 400 of those across the Midwest. No telling yet how they might figure into the company's future. Indianapolis This Week will be right back after a quick break. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at the handle Indy This Week. We'll be right back.
Red Robin. Yum. Hope you're having a fantastic Sunday. Storm Team 6 meteorologist Kyle Mounds here with you. It is a soggy Sunday, and we're going to continue with some rain. Isolated thunderstorm moving through here as we go through the afternoon hours, and then this all will start to taper off for us as we head into the evening. We'll keep those clouds around. Temperatures not going to be quite as warm as what we've had the last couple of days. Instead of the 70s, we'll settle for low to mid 60s around central Indiana. And then this evening, heading out to the Pacers game, they're getting ready to take on the 76ers. I think we will have those rain showers out of here at that point. Temperatures right around 60 degrees. Overnight lows into the middle and upper 40s as we get that break from the rain. But more rain is going to move in here as we head through our Monday evening. A couple of those storms could be on the strong to severe side with some gusty winds, maybe even some hail. 7-day planning forecast finally drying things out on Tuesday and Wednesday. Slightly cooler air moving in. Highs in the upper 50s, but rain rounds out the week.
Welcome back to Indianapolis This Week. I'm Lauren Casey. It's time for the 6, so here are the 6 things you need to know to gear up for this week. First, take a step back in time by taking a walk outdoors at Conner Prairie. The interactive history park will reopen their outdoor adventures to the public on Tuesday. You and the kids can also go see these little guys' new goats that are coming to Conner Prairie. We'll soak in the smells of spring at the Indianapolis Museum of Art. They're inviting you to their Spring Blooms exhibit. That's featuring more than 70,000 blooming bulbs across their more than 150 acres. Well, hey, if you're a fan of the movie, you may be a fan of the dance. You can watch the original version of Beauty and the Beast Ballet at the Basile Theater in downtown Indy. That's on March 31st at 7:30 and then again on Saturday. Well, many students are on spring break this week, so it's a great time for teens to get some skills for the workplace. There's a 4-day training starting on Monday for teens 15 and older. They will learn skills that will help them land that summer job. Click on the hot button section of theindychannel.com for more information. Well, you can cheer on our Indy 11 soccer players at their season home opener at the Michael A. Carroll Stadium on Saturday. That match starts at 3 o'clock against Puerto Rico FC. On your mark, get set, go see the greatest spectacle in Pinewood Derby racing. That's right, these homemade cars will race across a 2-story, 125-foot track at the Idlejourg Museum on Saturday. All participants and their cars must be registered by 1 o'clock. That's what's ahead this week. Jason, back to you.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you so much for joining us here on Indianapolis This Week. For Raphael, Katie, and our entire team, have a fantastic Sunday, everybody.